Where are we while all this is happening right in front of our eyes? Are we paying attention?
One of the big questions of our age, I think, is whether the internet is helping make people more informed. And clearly we all have a lot more access to information. But is that information turning into a better informed citizenry that's better able to make decisions about the important issues that we all face? And at this point, we have a lot of data on this. And I think we can actually say it's not really.
This is no longer a generation that lives deliberately, that lives its life, that lives in the moment. I think that has time for reflection. We ask ourselves questions. If the velocity and volume is such that I send you a tweet or I send you a text, you have to answer me back. You can't. Nobody answers a text by saying, I have to think about that for 2 weeks. The communication demands a response. Well, that means that we start to ask each other questions that are easy to answer. And so I think we live in a kind of paradoxical time, and we're giving a whole generation a very paradoxical message. The world is more and more and more and more complex. On the other hand, we're only going to ask you a question that you can answer in 2 seconds. So we leave ourselves less and less time for reflection because our communications media push us to quick responses. And quite frankly, the questions before our planet right now are not questions that should be answered or thought about in the time space of texting.
It took radio 38 years to reach 50 million people. Television did it in 13. It took the web less than 5. By 1999, there were more than 150 million people online, browsing through more than 1 billion web pages.
Think about it. In much less than one human lifetime, we've literally gone from no computers at all to computers everywhere, connected to all the other computers everywhere, seemingly touching every facet of our lives. A colossal paradigm shift in society.
Please select your payment method.
What we can see over time is computing power becoming incredibly powerful. Storage becoming bigger. We're now talking not, megabytes. In the first computer I had, 0.5 megabyte was huge. Today we're talking about terabytes of data. We're also talking about processing speeds. I remember connecting at 1200 baud rate. Now we're connecting with broadband and sending hundreds of megabits per second of detailed information through our networks. We're talking about huge storage capabilities and processing power and a miniaturization of technology. We're not talking bricks anymore, but small implants that you can actually wear even, or tags that you can place onto your clothing. So a lot has happened during the last 25 years, and the next 25 years seem to be going as rapidly.
So what does it mean to live in this world of technology, mediated by these power blocks, that have these sorts of passions and history? And when their ability to spread and perpetuate their passions is more powerful today than ever before.
If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-traveled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep traveling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action.
How many of us can relate to this experience? Living vicariously through the computer, jumping from one thing to the next. Multitasking, digitally tethered. Looking up something, only to end up somewhere else completely unrelated. How many hours have you spent looking up fleeting curiosities? And how much of it do you remember? What do you take in? How many of us think through the global computer? And how has this already changed the way we think, feel, read and write, learn, understand, and remember?
But that's not the same as understanding. Information is not knowledge, and I think this is what people confuse. And by knowledge, I refer to content, and content for me is true intelligence, which is where you can see one thing in terms of another.
And a world where we don't have to remember anything anymore, because we can just look it up on Google. Can you see this as one thing in terms of another?
I think we are becoming more and more stupid. We don't have to work our brains so hard. Any information we need to know, we can instantly find it on an internet search system. And the worst thing would be to have a USB portal into our brain, so it's there immediately. Because the moment you take that away, you're dumb. You haven't got any information, you're relying on it.
I think the great value of thinking deeply and reading deeply and concentrating in general is that we begin to develop a unique personality, a unique intellect that's ours and ours alone. And that requires, I think, deep thought and in the ability to make our own associations and our own connections about things we understand deeply inside our own mind, rather than relying on the associations and connections that might be out in the world and that we might access through hyperlinks, for instance. So I really think that the human self and the human personality becomes much richer when we can slow down and when we can think deeply and engage with information in more than just kind of a cursory manner.
What if that information was tailored and edited just for you, like an invisible fine-tuning of the world? And if you weren't paying close attention, how would you know?
The commercial surveillance system that the advertisers have created all across the world is stunning and a cause for serious alarm. It threatens our civil liberties. It's about getting us to buy high interest rate credit cards, junk food, prescription drugs for illnesses we may or may not have, politicians who may or may not be good for us. That's what all this data is being used for. We have no access to this data. We have no ability to control this information. We can't challenge it. We can't correct it. So we've allowed the Googles and the Facebooks and the Yahoos to create invisible repositories of information about each and every one of us that they can use when it's close to us. So ultimately, it's not about just selling. It's about maybe the next evolution of capitalism, creating an undemocratic society.
Most of the reactions that have taken place in art, including those that come under the head of the beatniks and the hippies, have some underlying sense in the reaction itself. But the remedy is part of the disease. The remedy, in fact, makes it easier for the institutions that now have their hold upon us to be even more compulsive and even more effective than ever before. If we don't care, if we drop out, if we lose ourselves in insane fantasy of some kind, we lose our possibility of restoring our own autonomy, of taking charge of our life, because this requires greater energy, greater effort than that which is required to live through the daily life of a machine worker. We have to become fully activated human beings, every part of us, tremendously alive and ready to take charge. And this can't be done by people who are in escape, people who are who form the habit of total rejection. We must know what we want, not just what we don't want.
We are sleepwalking into a world that has become over-reliant on technique. Soon, we will not just be talking about the social implications of technology, but about how society has become technology. We, who created the computer, will invite it into our body to govern us, and the machine itself will rule over us. Ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with one final question. Who will control this emerging new smart surveillance infrastructure? And what will be the rights of the controlled?